Today we're diving into another classic horror flick. The girl just took a bath while her brother-in-law was home. Then something terrifying happened. In an instant, the girl's hand was scalded beyond recognition. She kept letting out agonizing screams. Suddenly came a creepy knocking sound from outside the door. Dark red blood surged madly into the bathroom, and right after, scalding boiling water poured down from above. Just as the girl was screaming her lungs out, a ghostly figure suddenly appeared imprinted on the glass window. Just like that, the ghost figure silently watched the girl go from hysterical to complete despair. So young, yet already knows how to kill and destroy someone's heart. What kind of experiences turned the boy so cold-blooded? The story begins on a stormy, thunder-filled night. The boy Ben was suddenly startled awake by the sound of thunder. He quickly got up and went downstairs to look for his parents. But what he saw was utterly horrifying. His father was lying on the floor covered in blood. Both his feet had been brutally severed and tossed aside. His mother was holding a kitchen knife, mechanically hacking at her own ankles. Even chopping the bone marrow to pieces, she wouldn't stop. The woman silently turned her head and gave the boy a creepy smile. Then, right in front of him, she decisively slit her own throat. The police arrived at the scene as soon as they received the report. The bloody scene made even the seasoned officers shudder in horror. The two deceased had mutilated themselves, stabbing their bodies full of holes like a beehive. They ultimately died from excessive blood loss and shock. Even more bizarre, there wasn't a trace of pain on the victims' faces. It was as if they didn't even know the knife in their hand was cutting themselves. The boy, overwhelmed by the trauma, suffered an asthma attack. For a while, no one was there to look after him. Through investigating social connections, the police discovered that the boy's grandmother had mysteriously disappeared 2 months earlier and still hadn't returned. In just one night, Ben became a helpless orphan. His parents were dead. His grandmother was missing. Ben's guardianship naturally fell to his uncle. The police originally thought Zhang would make excuses to refuse. Unexpectedly, Zhang agreed readily. And just like that, Zhang brought his wife Sony and his sister-in-law Yurin to move into Ben's house. However, right after Yurin arrived, she felt uneasy all over. It was as if a pair of eyes were staring at her from behind. When she saw Ben, that feeling grew even stronger. That instinctive physical revulsion. Even Yurin herself found it inexplicably strange. After settling everything, Seoni went outside to take out the trash. When she returned to the yard, she casually noticed a storage shed with its door tightly locked. Judging by the rust all over the lock, it had clearly been abandoned for a long time. Curious, Seoni stood on her tiptoes to peek inside. But it was pitch black inside. She couldn't see a thing, so she gave up. She turned around to clean the yard. But at that moment, a figure passed by outside the yard behind her. She was about to say hello, but the other person ran away like they'd seen a ghost. At that moment, Zhang called her, being all lovey-dovey. The two were chatting happily, when suddenly a piercing noise came through Zhang's phone. And on Seoni's side, the sound cut out for no reason. At the same time, Seoni saw Ben on the sofa picking at his foot. At first, they just thought it was bad signal. She didn't pay much attention to it. However, the really creepy stuff was still yet to come. During dinner, Seoni deliberately placed the plate of meat right next to Ben. But Ben absolutely refused to touch the plate of meat the whole time. So Seoni kindly picked up a piece and put it into his bowl. This made Yurin, who had always relied on her big sister since childhood, feel jealous. She deliberately used the excuse of getting water to send Seoni away. At that moment, Ben's ankle started itching like crazy. Ignoring everyone's strange looks, he left the dinner table. It turns out that due to his constitution, he has never eaten meat since he was little. And everyone quickly forgot about this little incident. Time soon passed to nighttime. Seoni had just fallen asleep not long ago when she was woken up by Zhang's foot pressing on her. Half asleep, she told Zhang to move his foot away. But Zhang didn't respond at all. So Seoni had no choice but to turn around to check. To her horror, she found Zhang sleeping soundly beside her. He hadn't moved his foot at all. Seoni started to panic. So whose foot was pressing down on her just now? At that moment, the blanket on her body was slowly pulled off. Seoni turned around in terror. Seoni suddenly woke up from the dream. But the suffocating feeling from the dream left her terrified and uneasy. To distract herself, Seoni called a locksmith to open that storage room. She wanted to see what was really hidden inside. However, reality was completely different from what she imagined. It was filled with red cloths covered in talisman writings. There was an altar in the middle. Next to it were candles that hadn't fully burned out. On the floor lay an open ancient book. Curious, Seoni picked it up and started flipping through. Seoni was so startled by this prank that her heart pounded wildly. She thought these things were way too ominous. She immediately told Jungwon to throw everything away. But Jungwon said Bin's grandmother was a spirit medium. She cared a lot about these items. Throwing them away casually would be disrespectful to the elderly. Just as the two were arguing, the boy Bin came back all dirty and covered in dust. Jungwon instantly turned his anger toward him. He yelled that Bin stank like a pig. Luckily, Seoni stepped in to stop it. She even prepared dinner for him.
저기 혹시 현관앞 창고 거기 들어가면 안 되는데.
That night, Jungwon took the initiative to make up with Seoni. As expected from a married couple fight at the head of the bed, make up at the foot. As soon as Yurin got home, she heard the sound of the two of them going at it like stacked pancakes. With no choice, she put on her headphones and continued studying. However, as soon as midnight struck at 12, with a toy crashing to the ground, strange noises started coming from upstairs. So she angrily went upstairs, only to find Bin not sleeping in the middle of the night. He was under the desk with a creepy expression, slapping something hard. Yurin asked what the heck he was doing in the middle of the night, but Bin didn't react at all. He just shot her a vicious, sinister glare. At the same time, the slapping got faster and faster. Then, Yurin was suddenly engulfed by seawater. When she woke up again, she discovered that one of her legs had been chopped off. Under the bloody mess was Bin's chilling, piercing stare. But the next second, she woke up on the bed, completely unharmed. This nightmare left Yurin shaken to her core. She wanted to confront Bin about it, but she unexpectedly heard. There was this hollow tapping coming from the shed, like someone hitting a wooden block. It wasn't actually a wooden block, but let's just call it that. As if guided by some supernatural force, Yurin walked into the storage room. And then she witnessed a bizarre scene. From that point on, Bin seemed like a completely different person. No longer the helpless little lamb who let others bully him. The next day, his classmates mocked Bin again. They say the medium's grandson is a monster. They even deliberately pushed him down. Facing everyone's ridicule, Bin furiously scratched at his smelly foot. At that moment, the scar on his ankle became even more noticeable. All sorts of strange and bizarre memories flooded into Bin's mind. Suddenly, he stabbed a pencil into a classmate's carotid artery. Such a bloody, gruesome scene. Bin smiled with satisfaction. Because the situation was so serious, Jungwon harshly scolded Bin. But Bin kept insisting that he didn't do it. He even had an asthma attack from getting so worked up. He collapsed on the sofa, gasping for air non-stop. Seoni quickly covered his mouth and nose with a plastic bag. That finally got him out of danger. Because of this incident, the couple decided not to pursue the matter of him hurting someone anymore. Seoni even gently soothed Bin to sleep. That night, after Bin woke up screaming from a nightmare, he said something shocking again.
기진이? 엄마랑 아빠도 다 걔가 죽였어. 꿈이라서 그래. 꿈? 기진이가 작은 엄마 노려봐요.
Bin's words instantly sent a chill down Seoni's spine. That night, the wound on Bin's ankle turned into a bloody mess, and the bird in the cage seemed to sense something. It flapped its wings wildly and screeched. Even the object on the ancestral altar in the storeroom mysteriously fell over. All of this felt like an omen that danger was approaching. The next morning, Seoni asked Bin if he remembered what he said last night, but Bin just looked completely clueless. Then he started ravenously tearing into meat. His every move was extremely crude. There was no trace of the old him left. At that moment, Seoni overlooked one crucial thing. Bin used to be vegetarian. Is this kid still Bin? When Seoni dropped Bin off at school, she was still worried he'd get bullied by classmates, but Bin confidently said he could handle it. That afternoon after school, Bin was targeted again by Dongmin, the kid who always bullied him. This time, though, he was incredibly calm. He walked straight to a quiet, deserted alley. Then he went into an abandoned warehouse. When Dongmin got there, he didn't see Bin and started looking around. Suddenly, there was movement from a plastic bag nearby. Dongmin leaned in to check it out. Meanwhile, Seoni braved the rain to go buy fruit at the shop. She unexpectedly recognized the shop owner. It was the woman who had fled in panic that day. After some casual chatting, the shop owner hesitantly told Seoni that Bin's grandmother went missing because the ghost she was raising got angry. Before disappearing, the grandmother kept performing rituals to suppress the ghost, but she failed anyway. That's what caused her to vanish. After the daughter went insane, she first killed her husband, then took her own life. Hearing this, Seoni was both furious and terrified. She worried that if this kept going, even she might not be safe. As soon as she got home, she demanded they move out immediately, and she scolded Jengwon for lying to her. Earlier, Jengwon had clearly told her that Bin's parents died in a car accident. Jengwon explained that he moved here because he owed gambling debts. Their previous house had already been mortgaged. He was completely broke. This haunted house was their only place to stay. Yurin also took the chance to say that ever since she moved in, she felt something was seriously off about this house. Especially Bin. He always gave off such a creepy vibe. But at that point, Seoni hadn't suspected Bin at all. She even thought Yurin was just jealous and competing for attention. Suddenly, Bin burst into the house full of energy. He was completely different from his usual lifeless self. His face was beaming with a constant smile. Seeing bloodstains on him, Seoni quickly asked what happened, but Bin just replied that he accidentally got it while helping an injured classmate. That night, Seoni got a call from the school. They said Dongmin, the kid who always bullied Bin, had gone missing. But when Seoni asked Bin about it, he claimed he knew nothing. He even complained that her voice was too loud and disturbing his TV time. Yurin, unable to stand it, jumped in to defend Seoni. Bin didn't say a word. He just glared at her menacingly. Sure enough, strange things happened that night. While Yurin was sound asleep, Bin stood over her, waving scissors across her face over and over. Suddenly, Yurin jolted awake from the nightmare again. Her heart pounding, she quickly locked her bedroom door. What she didn't know was that at that very moment Bin was standing right outside. At the same time, thanks to the police's relentless efforts, they finally located Bin's missing grandmother. She had fallen off a cliff, been rescued, and was sent to a nursing home. At this moment, her eyes are blank and lifeless. She has almost completely lost the ability to communicate. She just keeps muttering to himself non-stop. Suddenly, she gets agitated and grabs the officer by the throat. In a daze, the officer actually sees Bin's figure. Feeling something is seriously wrong, the officer pulls up the crime scene photos again. This time, by zooming in on the picture, he sees Bin's reflection right in the dead Gahee's pupils. So the officer goes to find Bin. At this point, Bin still looks completely harmless and innocent. Cut to another scene. Bin is sitting happily on the lawn, singing cheerfully. Seoni walks over to check on him. He's vivisecting a dragonfly alive. Later, while tidying up the room, Seoni finds something on Bin's bookshelf. It's a creepy drawing. It looks exactly like the content described in the ancient book in the storage room. At this point, Seoni finally senses something is very off. She hurries back to the storage room to take another look. As she flips through the pages, countless horrifying images flood into her mind out of nowhere. Just as she's completely baffled and can't figure it out, the boy Bin suddenly appears.
여기 들어오면 안 된다고 했잖아.
That night, Seoni is fast asleep when her phone rings and wakes her up. But the moment she opens her eyes, the boy Bin vanishes in an instant. Seoni's heart jumps into her throat. In the split second she reaches for the light, Bin appears again, this time covered in blood. Seoni is gripped by extreme terror. Instinctively, she reaches out to her husband, but Janwan doesn't move at all. Realizing something's wrong, Seoni quickly turns around. Janwan beside her has already become a mangled, bloody corpse. Meanwhile, Bin slips under the covers, slowly crawling underneath her. After that terrifying nightmare, Seoni finally believes there's something seriously wrong with Bin. But Bin has already turned his evil attention to Yurin. He takes off her earphones, begging her to play a game with him. Yurin senses something's not right. She instinctively refuses, but Bin keeps pestering her relentlessly. Yurin has no choice but to get up and play hide-and-seek with him. But right after that, Bin leads Yurin to the edge of the rooftop and tells her to count down there. Yurin doesn't think much of it. She closes her eyes and does exactly what Bin asked. But just as she's about to reach 30 seconds, Bin suddenly reaches out toward her, trying to push Yurin off the rooftop. Thankfully, Seoni appears at the window just in time, forcing Bin to barely stop himself. This scene leaves Seoni in utter panic and dread, and what happens the next day chills her to the bone even more. Bin's terrifying nature has already gone beyond anyone's understanding. The next morning, everyone is woken by Yurin's screams. Someone had used a knife to mutilate her hamster beyond recognition. Yurin is absolutely certain Bin did it, so she storms out of the room. Grinding her teeth, she slaps him hard across the face. Jongwon, unaware of what's going on, rushes out to stop her. At the same time, he defends Bin, saying, "A child could never do something so cruel. Besides, Yurin has no proof." The moment he finishes speaking, Seoni sharply snaps back at him. There's also no proof that Bin didn't do it.
뭐?
나도 안 했고 당신도 안 했다면 남는 건 비니 문제 아니야?
While everyone is arguing, Bin's grandmother suddenly shows up. Without a word, she drags Bin forcefully into the storage room, then locks the door tightly and begins performing an exorcism on him. It turns out Bin has already been possessed by an evil spirit. As the ritual continues, Bin's face grows uglier and uglier. He starts breathing heavily, rolling his eyes back non-stop. However, the evil spirit's resentment is far too strong. After a fierce struggle, the grandmother spits blood from her mouth. She nearly loses the battle, but right at that moment, Jenwan suddenly bursts through the door. Without hesitation, he shoves the grandmother aside, forcibly interrupting the ritual. And it's precisely this foolish action that plants the seeds of tragedy later on. Seoni wants to help the grandmother, but at this point, it's already too late to save her.
기친이라니요? 대체 걔가 누구예요?
아직까지 죽은 기억이 지워지지 않은 거야. 그 아이를 태워야 몸을 태워.
Seoni turned to call for help, but Bin took the chance to go back to the storage room. He smothered his grandmother to death. This scene was witnessed by Yurin. In shock, she even forgot to run away. She collapsed on the ground in terror. Bin calmly approached her. He threatened her not to tell anyone. Until the police took away the body, Yurin didn't say a single word. A series of strange events had already left Seoni walking on thin ice. While Bin was at school, she searched everywhere in his bedroom. At the very bottom of the wardrobe, she found Dongmin's missing person poster and a kid's phone watch with Dongmin's name on it. At that moment, all the answers became clear. So she secretly followed Bin. Sure enough, she found that abandoned warehouse. There, she finally saw Dongmin, who had been missing for days. Unfortunately, his legs had been chopped off. He was no longer breathing. Then she saw the police officer from before. Now his legs were also chopped off. He had been tortured beyond recognition. It turns out Bin is a complete monster. Seoni was completely panicked. She rushed home while calling to warn Yurin. At that time, Yurin was taking a shower and didn't hear the phone at all. After finishing her shower, she tried to open the door to leave. but the doorknob was scalding hot, making her scream in pain. Before she could recover, a flood of blood seeped through the door crack. Boiling hot water shot straight at Yurin, scalding her skin and flesh open. When Sony rushed back home, the house was deathly silent. She grabbed a baseball bat and cautiously approached the living room. Looking down, she saw Jungwon covered in blood.
어디 갔다 와요? 한참 찾았네.
이유가 뭐야?
우리 이제부터 재미있게 놀아요.
As he spoke, Bin raised the knife and slashed at Sony. After a struggle, Seoni used her strength advantage to fling Bin away. She seized the moment to escape to the yard, but suddenly she heard Yurin's heart-wrenching cries for help coming from the storage room. She rushed in without hesitation. There she unexpectedly saw a water jar covered in talisman papers. As the jar broke open, the corpse of a little boy suddenly appeared before her eyes. It turns out that back then, Bin's mother suffered from infertility. This made her mother-in-law extremely dissatisfied with her. She kept urging her son to divorce her. To save her marriage, she went so far as to kidnap someone else's child, and begged her mother, the spirit medium, to refine it into a little ghost. Because once the little ghost was successfully refined, it could enter her womb. That way, she could finally become a mother. Under her daughter's repeated pleas, Bin's grandmother finally agreed. They cruelly used a knife to sever the child's legs, and then soaked him in a jar full of water, smothering him to death inside. After sealing the lid, they used talisman papers to lock the soul inside. After 81 days of refinement, the little ghost was finally complete. Gahi fulfilled her wish of becoming a mother. But that innocent child vanished forever. He was the Gijin that Bin kept mentioning. The moment she learned the truth, Seoni felt immense heartache. So when Bin stabbed toward her, she shouted out that name.
이제 그만해. 이제 그만하자 이런 짓.
But Gijin's tragedy couldn't be erased with just a few words from Seoni. He could have had a wonderful life, but because of Bin's mother's selfishness, he sacrificed his young life. How could such a deep blood feud be brushed aside so easily? Heart-piercing pain, bone-chilling cold. Who could take his place? So he raised the knife towards Seoni once again. Just as Seoni's life hangs by a thread, Bin's soul finally awakens. He desperately fights to take back control of the body. He turns the knife in his hand toward his own neck, but Gijin inside him stops it. The two souls hold each other in check. Seoni suddenly stands up. She grabs a candle and sets Gijin's body on fire. As long as the body is reduced to ashes, Gijin's ghost can finally be dispelled. But right before the body is completely consumed, Seoni suddenly rushes over and hugs Gijin. Her pity for this child is genuine. Her hope that he can have a happy, carefree next life is genuine too. What Seoni doesn't know is that this very embrace creates a mysterious connection between her and Gijin. Seoni clearly wasn't pregnant before her husband died. Yet a few months later, she unexpectedly becomes pregnant. Seoni goes to the hospital for a checkup. On the hospital screen, the image she sees fills her with absolute terror. The child's face is already outlined in her pupils. And that's where the story ends.